Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. I don't know about you, but this weekend felt like an eternity, from the release of the Epstein files, the new batch of it by the US Department of Justice, to the events that we saw on Friday. And this, of course, played out as South Africa had sent Israel's chargé d'affaires Ariel Seidman packing and declaring him persona non grata in what continues to be this frosty relationships between the two states. Now, DIRCO said it follows a series of what it calls unacceptable violations of diplomatic norms and practices that poses a direct challenge to South Africa's sovereignty. Now, we need to look to obviously what had happened last week when members of the Israeli embassy visited the Eastern Cape on an invitation by the Abatembu King Dalindyebo. This, of course, caused a backlash from the Eastern Cape government, who said they are going to be launching their own provincial investigation. Now, when South Africa had declared Seidman persona non grata, the Israeli government declared South Africa's ambassador to Palestine, Shaun Beineveld, persona non grata amid what we have been seeing on Friday. Joining me now to take this discussion forward, I'd like to welcome international relations expert and former diplomat, Dr. Kingsley Makhubela. Dr. Makhubela, always good having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Faraz, thanks very much for the invitation.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Dr. Makhubela, what we saw last week, the events within the Eastern Cape, how much did this force the hand of the International Relations Department to make such a massive decision like what they did?
You know, Faraz, the Israeli delegation's visit to the hospital and subsequent pronouncement that they want to undertake water projects and so on, it's in violation of Article 41 of the Vienna Convention. This article requires all accredited diplomatic missions to work through the Department of International Relations in engagement with any organs of the state within the Republic. It appears so far that the Israeli embassy did not seek that permission from DIRCO. So that's one thing that is totally abnormal. They know they shouldn't do it. They know the process and the procedure. Even though they may have been approached, Article 41 is straightforward. It puts the responsibility also on the mission when they are approached to say, we can only engage with you once you have informed the Department of International Relations, and the Department of International Relations has approached us in this matter. So it's one thing that is quite abnormal that they have done. But to compound this thing, Faraz, the Eastern Cape government to say they would institute their own investigation and to issue out statement is a bit abnormal. They shouldn't have done that. A foreign policy in this country is not a concurrent function. It's the sole responsibility of the national government. What the provincial government should have done is to escalate the matter to the national government, take it up with DIRCO, and let DIRCO be the one that issues out the statements. Once they start making pronouncements about an area that they have no competency about, they create confusion around this matter. That is where we are in terms of that for us.
Dr. Makhubela, for the interest sake of the viewer, because Ariel Seidman was the chargé d'affaires. Now, obviously, this is an inferior rank to that of an ambassador. Regardless whether you are a chargé d'affaires or an ambassador, am I right in saying, Dr. Makhubela, they still need to seek permission, whether written or verbally, to the International Relations Department requesting, and I want to specify that word there, requesting some sort of intervention, assistance, donation, work to be done in a province. So DIRCO would have to be your point in making that request in order to go ahead and do the work in a provincial department.
Absolutely. That's a violation of Article 41. Israeli embassy, and in this case, Ariel Seidman he knows the procedure. Unless they've been given permission, you know what is puzzling about this matter for us is that DECO has never made any pronouncements about this. Statements that I have seen so far, they came from the provincial government. The national government has been quiet about this visit to the Eastern Cape. There's nothing wrong in the Israeli embassy talking to Dalinjebo and so on, but to start engaging in activities there, it's something totally different. They shouldn't have done that. They should have gone through DECO in terms of these activities.
Dr. Makhubela, I want to touch on the expelling of Shaun Beineveld because this is quite interesting. This was a complete tit for tat. So I know we've spoken about this off air, but while we have the viewers' indulgence on this, for those who are asking, how could Israel go ahead and expel a South African ambassador to the state of Palestine? Discuss this with us, because as we obviously stand right now, Israel is the occupying power over Palestine. So what more international laws have Israel broken by expelling an ambassador, which is not even to Israel, it's an ambassador to the state of Palestine?
Well, that's what for us shows how Israel is in total disregard of international law. Shaun is not accredited to Israel. The embassy of South Africa in Israel has been withdrawn. It's not shut down, it's been withdrawn. And I don't know if the South African government has appointed an interest section with any embassy. That I don't know. But Israel, to go and expel a diplomat who is accredited to the state of Palestine was a bit unusual. Even as an occupying power, I think they overstretched their authority in doing that. They should have at least had the respect. But we know and we've seen how Israel is in total disregard of international law. So they are able to do that, and there won't be any consequences. If this was a reverse role and this was done by somebody else, it would have been a very serious issue. People would have called a meeting of the Security Council to take decision on the matter. But because Israel, it's protected by the United States, it's able to do these things, which is basically unusual. It's not the first time they're doing this with South Africa. They've done this with Turkey. They've expelled Norwegian diplomats also accredited to the state of Palestine. So it's not unusual. And nothing happened in the past, nothing happened now, and nothing would happen in future.
Dr. Makhubela, the the Israeli embassy in South Africa, I beg your pardon, still stands, even though the ambassador was downgraded. And of course, this is where we are in terms of a chargé affairs. Can Israel still send another diplomat, meaning another chargé affairs, to South Africa, given the frosty relationships between Tel Aviv right now in Pretoria? Are we at a point where Israel can still go ahead and do it, given that the Israeli embassy in South Africa is still in existence?
For us, the Israeli ambassador here was not expelled by South Africa. Israel, you're quite correct, Israel decided to downgrade the mission. The chargé d'affaires are usually appointed from amongst the 7 diplomatic staff. Israel, of course, has the right to replace Ariel Seidman, and they would have to make a request to DECO to tell them they are appointing somebody else. But Israel has equally the responsibility. They can do that, and have the authority to appoint another chargé d'affaires from among 7 Israeli diplomats who are at the mission. They can do that.
One final question before we go to the break, Dr. Makhubela. King Dalinjebo, so I had a discussion with the Eastern Cape government on Thursday, and of course, you know, the 2 words that were mentioned, traditional leader. Now, for anyone out there as a South African, you know, asking the question, and of course, as a question posed to you, Dr. Makhubela, how could a traditional leader allow for foreign dignitaries to come and get the assistance? How does this all play out? Because I listened to his interview over the weekend on Newsroom Africa, and he was quite vehemently defensive of the decision to go ahead and have the Israeli delegation visiting. What is the role with regards to traditional leaders, especially a king like Dalinyebu, who held such a important position, not only within the Eastern Cape, but also within the South African aspect of traditional leaders?
You know, for us, Article 41 again.
Yes.
Really, it's quite explicit. The diplomatic mission accredited to the Republic, they should not interfere in the domestic affairs of the country. They clearly know, the Israelis are quite aware that this South Africa is a republic. It's not a kingdom. It's a republic. They are aware that they have to communicate in their activities. They have to get permission from DECO. They didn't seek that permission. They went ahead and did whatever they wanted to do. That is quite incorrect. It's a violation of the normal diplomatic practice. But I want to come to the issue, does it warrant invoking Article 9 of the Vienna Convention? In my own view, it doesn't. The violation of the normal diplomatic etiquette, it happens now and then. It's not a serious thing. You only invoke Article 9 in very serious situations. But for us, me and you, we know there's tension between South Africa and the State of Israel. And Mr. Seidman should have been very careful, and he should have been cognizant of this tension that exists between the two countries and stick to his lane. By doing this, he of course invited the wrath of the South African government. And the South African government is entirely at liberty to use any operation of the Israeli embassy outside the norm and the requirement of the Vienna Convention. In this case, they are in violation of the Vienna Convention, but in my own view, it doesn't warrant invoking Article 9 because somebody has just decided to disregard Article 41 of the Convention. You have to evaluate the seriousness of the violation. That's where you invoke Article 9. You know, insulting the president will require invoking Article 9. It's unprecedented that an accredited diplomatic mission would insult the head of state where they are accredited to.
Dr. Makhubela, I have to stop you there, but we will continue this conversation after the break because now comes the question. Another nation that South Africa has frosty relationship with, the United States of America. Who's Israel's closest ally? The United States of America. How will this play out? My conversation with Dr. Makhubela continues after the break. Welcome back to News in Focus. Well, the United States of America and, of course, its ambassador, Brent Bozell III, has not yet released a statement, but one would wonder or one would anticipate a potential statement coming out. And the reason why I say this is because potentially when we see the relationship between the US and Israel and the frosty relationship between Pretoria and Washington, something has to give. Dr. Makhubela, how does this play out now? Because the United States of America, well, they're upset with South Africa on a number of issues. Obviously, the sort of white genocide claims that has been peddled about. But of course, you know, we saw earlier on last month the naval drills that were happening, and of course, Iran being involved in it, and the US having this potential impending strike on Iran. How do you see this playing out? Because this expelling or discharging of the Israeli chargé d'affaires is not going to make Washington any happy at all.
Well, it's definitely not going to make Washington happy because the administration now in Washington has taken upon itself that the enemy of Israel is their enemy. So they are likely to retaliate on this issue. Sometimes this week, the appropriation bill is going through in Washington, and they will be looking into the AGOA Act, which is now due for renewal. My suspicion is that they are not going to support the inclusion of South Africa. If it passes through Congress, it may not make it in the White House. The White House may veto that and insist on the removal of South Africa. And I think if the White House were to insist on the removal of South Africa, you are likely to see South Africa being removed without any resistance, because the political divide in Washington is quite firm on this issue that South Africa is acting against the interests of the United States with respect to the state of Israel. So you're likely to see that tension. But the coming of the ambassador, the new ambassador here, I think once the ambassador is in the country, it will be the responsibility of South Africa, for us, I must say, to treat this ambassador with utmost respect and not to demean or denigrate his function in any form or shape. Doing that would be in violation of the Vienna Convention. So South Africa would have the responsibility to protect his integrity once South Africa has accepted that his credentials to be presented to the president. That's where the issue is in terms of the diplomatic practice. Is he going to be penalized for advancing his government policy? No. He will still insist that because his president said there's genocide, he may take the same attitude, but it's not him, it's a policy of his government. Would you then be able to send him back because of that? No, I don't think we can do that, and I don't think we should do that. We should only, he should be careful, I must say, because there's been a precedent set up in Washington in terms of invoking Article 9 with respect to Ambassador Rasool. If he behaves in the same manner, South Africa can do that.
You know what's interesting about this, Dr. Makhubela? Brent Bosel comes with the sort of Trojan horse mentality, because he's already made certain comments which I think is probably against the way South Africa's foreign policy is. One of them, of course, you know, this insistence of the sort of white genocide claims, and he's going to try and convince South Africa to drop the ICJ case against Israel. So it's going to be a tricky one for Dirko, isn't it, to try and sort of manage a US ambassador who, of course, is carrying out the same sort of policies as the government of Washington. So how does Dirko play this? And you've mentioned it quite importantly, the sort of respect that they would like to give this US ambassador, given the sort of relationship between Washington and Pretoria.
You know, for us, South Africa had the opportunity not to accept his nomination, because the US would have to nominate and send the nomination to the South African government. If for whatever reason South Africa was uncomfortable about comments that he made during the hearing at the Senate, South Africa had absolute responsibility and powers to say, we're not going to accept this one, we'd like you to nominate somebody else. So South Africa has accepted that. There's been a precedent, I think in 1977, the US nominee who was supposed to go to Greece, Schäffler, he made comments that Greece regarded as disparaging, and they refused to accept his nomination. But South Africa had absolute powers to do that. Now that South Africa is accepted, it means South Africa has accepted even the comments that he made. South Africa may differ with those comments, but South Africa doesn't regard those comments as warranting him not to be accepted as an ambassador of the US in South Africa. So that's where the issue is. Once South Africa has accepted his credential, irrespective of whatever he said in Congress, you can't later on and say, well, in the Senate, that's what you say, and you are saying it here again, we're going to give you persona non grata. It'll be unfortunate, because we know his views, and we've accepted his nomination despite his views.
Dr. Makhubela, the current scenario right now in terms of Dirko and South Africa protecting its sovereignty, you and I have spoken a number of times about the way South Africa have really exercised its right, and we need to, I think, for the viewers to also understand that every country has a right in terms of its defense of its sovereignty. South Africa is getting praise by some nations in terms of what it did on Friday. How has South Africa exercised really that right, and the sort of effectiveness of discharging a chargé d'affaires in Ariel Seidman, and really showing that you can't come to a nation, you can't make insults, of course, to the president, and of course do things without having the sort of formal applications towards the International Relations Department?
the challenge for us in this in the Seidman issue is that South Africa has said he has repeatedly insulted President Ramaphosa. Now, South Africa has actually South Africa did not have to give reasons for invoking Article 9. South Africa could have done that, but now that South Africa has said what are what are the things that triggered the invoking of Article 9 of the Convention, South Africa would need to show that. I haven't seen any evidence. South Africa has not published, these are the insults that he held at the president, repeated insults, so South Africa would need to do that. The other issue for us that I think South Africa made a big mistake in this matter, it's around this issue that, he did not inform DECO about the visit or the purported visit of senior officials from Israel. And that is in violation of the Vienna Convention. There's nothing like that in the Vienna Convention. That's not in violation of the Vienna Convention. Perhaps South Africa is confusing Article 10 of the Vienna Convention that speaks specifically to accredited diplomats, that they have the responsibility to tell if they are, a new diplomat's coming, the other one going back. South Africa has Israel had the responsibility to inform South Africa. But with respect to officials visiting, it happens very often. They come here to do evaluation for the mission, to do assessment, to look into systems and processes of their diplomats and so on. We do it also. We don't seek permission from the receiving state. So there's nothing in the Vienna Convention in terms of what South Africa is saying here. And I'm yet to see how South Africa is defending this position. What article of the Vienna Convention are they relying on in terms of that? Also, for us to really speak about violation of protocol as warranting invoking Article 9, it's unfortunate. Article 9 and really declaring a diplomat a persona non grata is very serious. You have to evaluate the gravity of the matter, the seriousness of the utterances or the behavior to do that. South Africa could have simply said, well, we are invoking Article 9 because his activities are incompatible with his function as a diplomat, and stay there and keep quiet. But to start telling these are the reasons without providing evidence, it puts South Africa in a back foot, I must say.
Well, interesting to see how this is all going to play out. Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, always a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure is mine for us. Thanks very much.
That's Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, international relations expert and former diplomat. This, I can tell you, is not going to end anytime soon. The reason? The United States of America. We are awaiting their statement with regards to what we saw on Friday. Now, after the break, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed a board that is going to oversee what had happened with regards to Iran's involvement in the will for peace. But there seems to be a bit of legal entanglements that are coming into this. We're going to have a chat to Advocate Pakkie Greef, who is from the South African National Defence Union. That conversation is after the break.